You don't notice it at first. It doesn't hit you like a loud warning or a sharp pain. It whispers, quiet, subtle, almost polite. A thought crosses your mind in the middle of the night and it doesn't feel like your own. You're falling behind. You try to ignore it. You turn to the other side of the bed. You check your phone. You distract yourself, but it comes back. Stronger this time. Something is wrong with you. And just like that, your entire day changes before it even begins. You wake up tired, not because your body didn't rest, but because your mind never did. You walk through your day carrying something invisible, a weight no one else can see. You smile when you have to. You nod when people talk, but inside, something is constantly pulling you down. And the worst part, it sounds like you. That voice in your head, it doesn't shout. It doesn't insult you in obvious ways. It doesn't need to. It just keeps reminding you of what you're not. Not strong enough. Not successful enough. Not young enough anymore. And if you're over 40, over 50, maybe even over 60, that voice becomes more convincing. Because now it has evidence. It reminds you of your energy levels. It points to your body slower than it used to be. It brings up your missed chances. The things you should have done. And slowly, without you even realizing it, your identity begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who can grow. You start seeing yourself as someone who is declining. This is where it becomes dangerous. Because your body listens to your mind more than you think. Every thought you repeat, it becomes a signal. Every sentence you tell yourself becomes a command. When you say, I'm always tired, your body follows. When you say, I can't change anymore, your brain agrees. When you say, this is just aging, your system starts shutting doors. Not because it has to, but because you told it to. This is not motivation. This is biology. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between truth and repetition. It only knows patterns. And if your internal voice has been negative for years, then your body has been living in that environment for years. Stress becomes your normal. Low energy becomes your baseline. Doubt becomes your identity. And over time, it doesn't just affect your thoughts. It affects your sleep, your digestion, your focus, your decisions. Even your posture changes. You walk a little slower. You hesitate a little more. You avoid things you once faced easily. Not because you lost your ability, but because you lost your internal support. No one told you this. No one sat you down and said, the way you talk to yourself is shaping your future. So you kept going. Repeating the same phrases, thinking the same thoughts, living inside the same mental environment, until one day something feels off. You can't explain it clearly. You just know you're not who you used to be. And that realization is heavy, because now there's fear. What if this is permanent? What if this is just how life is now? What if it's too late to change? This is the moment where most people give up, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, internally. They accept less energy, less confidence, less control. They start adjusting their life around their limitations instead of questioning them. And that's how decline becomes normal. But here's what most people never realize. The problem didn't start in your body. It started in your conversations, not the ones you have with others, the ones you have with yourself. Because every single day you are speaking, even when you're silent. There's a constant dialogue happening in your mind. And that dialogue is either building you or breaking you. There is no neutral. You are either reinforcing strength or reinforcing weakness. And if you've been feeling stuck, tired, disconnected, it's not random. It's rehearsed. It's practiced. It's repeated day after day, year after year, until it feels real, until it feels permanent, until it feels like this is just who I am. But what if it's not? What if the voice you've been listening to is not the one you should trust? What if the way you've been talking to yourself is the very thing keeping you where you are? And more importantly, what if changing that voice could change everything? Not overnight, not magically, but gradually, powerfully, biologically, because your brain is not fixed. It adapts, it rewires, it listens. Even now, even after years, even after decades, it is still responding to what you tell it. And that means one thing. You are not stuck. You are conditioned. And conditioning can be changed, but not by accident, not by passive thinking, not by hoping things will improve. It requires something very specific, something most people never try, not because it's complicated, but because it feels strange. At first, unnatural, almost uncomfortable. But this is where everything begins to shift, not outside, inside, in the exact place where the problem started, your voice. The one you hear every single day. The one that has been quietly shaping your life. What if, for just 3 days, you changed it? Not slightly. Not casually. but intentionally, deliberately? What if you spoke to yourself like someone who refuses to give up on you? What if you replaced every automatic negative thought with a conscious, powerful response? Not fake positivity, not empty words, but controlled, directed, supportive language. The kind your body actually responds to. Because whether you realize it or not, you've been practicing the opposite for years, and your system has adapted to it. So the question is not, will it work? The question is, are you willing to try something different before you decide it's too late? Because what you're about to discover is not just motivation. It's control. It's awareness. It's the beginning of taking your mind back from the voice that has been holding you down. And it starts with something very simple. 3 days. 3 days of speaking differently. 3 days of interrupting patterns. 3 days of becoming aware of what you say when no one else is listening. Because that is where your real life is being shaped. Not in public, not in front of others, but in the quiet moments where your thoughts become your reality. And if you can change that, even slightly, you don't just feel different, you become different. The first day feels strange. You don't even realize how often you attack yourself until you try to stop. It happens in small moments, almost invisible. You wake up and your mind says, I'm tired already. Normally you would accept it, believe it, let it shape your morning. But today you pause. You respond instead. I may feel tired, but I am still in control of how I move through this day. It feels unnatural, like forcing a different language inside your own head. Your mind resists. It brings the old thoughts back again and again. You're not improving. You're stuck. This won't change anything. And every time you interrupt it, not with anger, not with fake positivity, but with direction. I hear you, but I'm not following that thought today. Something small begins to shift. Not in your life, in your awareness. You start noticing how automatic your inner voice has become, how quickly it jumps to judgment, how easily it assumes failure before effort. By midday, you feel mentally tired, not from work, from observation, from catching yourself thinking in patterns you never questioned before. And that is when it hits you. This voice has been here for years, maybe decades. It has been commenting on everything. Your body, your choices, your past, your future, and you never challenged it. Not once. Because you thought it was you. But now something feels different. There is a gap forming, a small space between you and the voice. And in that space, awareness is born. On the second day, it gets harder. Because now the mind knows what you are doing. It fights back more aggressively. You try to focus on your work, but thoughts interrupt you constantly. What's the point? You've tried before. You always go back. And this time it feels more personal, more convincing, but you don't argue. You observe and you respond. I am not my past patterns. I am not my previous failures. I am allowed to change direction. It feels repetitive, almost mechanical at first, but something subtle begins to happen. You start to slow down mentally. Instead of reacting instantly to every thought, you pause. That pause is new. That pause is power. Because between a thought and your response, your life begins to change. By the end of the second day, you notice something unexpected. Your body feels slightly lighter. Not because anything physical changed, but because the internal pressure reduced. The constant self-criticism that usually runs in the background, this is no longer fully in control. There are moments of silence inside your mind, and those moments feel unfamiliar, but peaceful. On the third day, something deeper begins to unfold. The voice is still there, but it is weaker. Not gone, not erased, just less dominant. And now you are more present. You notice things you usually miss. Your breathing, your posture, your emotional reactions. You realize how much energy was being consumed just by internal conflict. And now that conflict is reducing. You start speaking to yourself differently without forcing it. More naturally, more calmly. You are doing better than you think. You don't need to rush your transformation. You are allowed to rebuild slowly. And for the first time, these words don't feel fake. They feel possible. This is the turning point. Not because your life has changed, but because your relationship with your mind has changed. You are no longer completely identified with every thought. You are beginning to witness them. And once you can witness a thought, you are no longer controlled by it. This is what most people never experience. They live inside their thoughts. They never step outside them. They believe every sentence their mind produces, especially the negative ones, especially the old ones. But now you are seeing something important. Thoughts are not commands. They are suggestions, and you get to choose which ones you accept. By the end of the third day, something quiet but powerful settles in. Confidence doesn't suddenly explode. Energy doesn't magically multiply. But something more important appears. Stability, a sense that you are not as mentally trapped as you used to be, that your inner world is flexible, not fixed. And that realization changes everything. Because if your internal voice can change in 3 days, then what else is possible over weeks, over months, over a year? You begin to understand something that was always true but never felt real. You are not trying to become someone new. You are unlearning who you were trained to believe you are. And that training can be reversed, not instantly, but intentionally. And this is where hope becomes practical, not emotional, not abstract. Practical, because now you have evidence. You experience the shift yourself, not from outside advice, but from internal observation. And that is far more powerful, because once you see the pattern, you cannot fully unsee it. The voice is still there. But now you know something it doesn't want you to know. It is not the truth. It is repetition. And repetition can be changed, which means your future is not locked. It is adjustable. And you are holding the control. Even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels small, it is still control. And it is growing. A deeper shift begins when you realize this is only the beginning, not the result. Most people quit before this stage because they expect instant transformation. But real change starts quietly, almost invisibly. You begin to understand that every conversation with yourself is either building a stronger version of you or reinforcing an older one. There is no neutral ground. Even now, your mind is listening, adapting, responding to the tone you choose. And if 3 days can create awareness, then continued practice can create identity. This is where discipline stops feeling like effort and starts like direction. You are no longer waiting to become different. You are actively becoming through every thought you choose to keep or release. Now something changes in how you wake up. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. But it is undeniable. The first thought that used to attack you now arrives slower and weaker, and you notice it before it becomes your identity. You catch it in motion. I'm tired. And instead of sinking into it, you respond differently. Maybe I feel tired, but I will not let that decide my entire day. This is the beginning of separation between thought and self, between reaction and choice. And once you experience that separation, you can never fully go back, because now you know something most people never realize. You are not the voice. You are the one who hears it. And that changes everything. As the days continue beyond the challenge, something deeper begins to stabilize inside you. The mind still generates thoughts. That will never stop. But your relationship with them changes. They no longer feel like instructions. They feel like passing weather. Some thoughts are heavy clouds. Some are light wind. But none of them define the sky. And for the first time in a long time, you feel space inside your mind. Not emptiness, space. A place where you can choose. Where you can breathe without internal conflict. Where you can think without being attacked by your own thinking. This is where real transformation begins. Not when life becomes perfect. But when your inner dialogue stops working against you, you start noticing physical changes too. Your shoulders are less tense. Your breathing is deeper without effort. Your sleep is slightly more stable. Not because your body suddenly healed, but because your nervous system is no longer under constant internal threat. The enemy was never outside. It was the repetition inside. And now that repetition is weakening. You begin to speak differently in daily life as well. Not just in your head, but in your actions. You hesitate less before starting tasks. You recover faster from setbacks. You stop interpreting small problems as identity failures. Instead of, I can't do this, you begin to say, this is difficult, but I can handle it step by step. And that shift may look small from the outside, but internally it is massive, because your brain is no longer operating under constant self-criticism. It is operating under guidance. And guidance creates movement. Self-attack creates paralysis. This is why most people stay stuck for years, not because they lack ability, but because their internal voice disables action before it begins. Now you are breaking that cycle, slowly, consciously, repetitively. And repetition is where identity is rebuilt. By the end of this process, something powerful becomes clear. You were never broken. You were programmed through repetition of thoughts you never questioned, through beliefs you inherited and never examined, through internal language you accepted as truth. But anything learned can be unlearned, and anything repeated can be rewritten. That is not theory. That is how the brain works. Your awareness is now stronger than your automatic patterns. And that is a turning point most people never reach, because most people never stay long enough to observe it. They try once. They expect instant change. And when the old voice returns, they believe they failed. But you did something different. You stayed long enough to see the mechanism behind it. And once you see the mechanism, you are no longer trapped inside it. Now the final truth becomes clear. The goal was never to silence your mind, The goal was to change your relationship with it, because a quiet mind is not the same as a controlled mind. A controlled mind is one where you choose which thoughts shape your actions, and that is what you are learning, not perfection. Control, not elimination. Awareness, and through that awareness, freedom begins to grow. Not the freedom to avoid difficulty, but the freedom to stop becoming your difficulty. As you continue forward from these 3 days, life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes manageable in a way it wasn't before. You still face stress. You still face uncertainty. You still face challenges that test you, but now you are not fighting yourself on top of them. And that alone changes your capacity to handle life, because when internal conflict decreases, external strength increases. You start realizing something profound. The strongest version of you was never missing. It was just buried under constant self-doubt. And now, piece by piece, that version is coming back. Not as a new person, but as the original one, without interference. And in that realization, there is a quiet power, a calm certainty that you are not at the end of your story. You are at the beginning of a different internal direction. One where your thoughts support you instead of sabotaging you. One where your voice becomes an ally instead of an enemy. And one where 3 days of awareness becomes the foundation of a new identity. Because in the end, the most powerful change was not what you did externally. It was what you stopped accepting internally. And once that changes, everything else follows. Carry this forward beyond these 3 days, not as a technique, but as a way of living. Each time the old voice returns, you will recognize it faster, and each time you will respond with more calm control. You will begin to notice that your decisions feel clearer, your reactions feel slower in a good way, and your energy is no longer constantly drained by inner conflict. This is not magic. It is awareness practiced repeatedly until it becomes identity. And when identity shifts, behavior follows without force. You will not need to fight yourself anymore to move forward. You will simply move because the resistance inside you is no longer leading your direction. And in that silence, where self-doubt once lived, you will finally meet the version of you that was always waiting beneath the noise, ready to lead your life forward with clarity again.